The morning sun cast golden rays through the stained glass windows of Westminster Abbey, painting colorful patterns across the ancient stone floors. Outside, millions of people lined the streets of London, their faces filled with anticipation and excitement. Flags waved in the gentle breeze as the world prepared to witness a historic moment that would be remembered for generations to come. Prince William stood in a private chamber within the abbey, his heart beating steadily despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. He adjusted his ceremonial robes one final time, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition resting on his shoulders. His wife Catherine stood beside him, her hand gently squeezing his, offering silent support and strength. Their children had already taken their places in the abbey, dressed in their finest clothes, understanding the importance of this day even at their young ages. The preparation for this coronation had taken months of careful planning. Every detail had been discussed, debated, and perfected. William had been involved in every decision, wanting to honor the traditions of his ancestors while also bringing a modern touch that reflected the times they lived in. He remembered the countless meetings with advisors, historians, and designers, each conversation shaping what would become one of the most talked about royal events in modern history. As he looked at himself in the ornate mirror, William thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had carried herself with such grace and dignity throughout her reign. He thought about his father, who had waited so long for his own moment to lead. Now it was William's turn to step into the role he had been preparing for his entire life. The responsibility felt immense, but he was ready. Catherine adjusted a small detail on his collar, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. She had been his rock through everything, and seeing her calm presence beside him filled William with confidence. They had discussed this moment many times over the years, talking late into the night about what kind of monarchs they wanted to be, how they wanted to serve their people, and what legacy they hoped to leave for their children. The sound of the abbey organ began to filter through the thick walls, its deep notes resonating through the building. William could hear the shuffling of thousands of feet as guests took their seats, the whispered conversations of dignitaries and royals from around the world. World leaders had traveled from every corner of the globe to witness this ceremony. The guest list read like a who's who of international power and influence. William's mind drifted to his brother Harry, who had arrived earlier that morning. Their relationship had been strained in recent years, with distance and disagreements creating walls between them. But today, Harry had put aside their differences to be present for this momentous occasion. William had seen him briefly, and though their conversation had been brief, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Family bonds, however tested, still held meaning. His father had given him advice the night before during a private dinner. The words had been simple but profound, speaking about duty, compassion, and the importance of staying true to oneself even when wearing the crown. William had listened carefully, absorbing every word, knowing that his father's wisdom came from decades of experience and observation. The designer who had created William's coronation attire had worked tirelessly to achieve something extraordinary. The outfit needed to respect tradition while making a statement about the future of the monarchy. Every thread, every button, every embellishment had been chosen with purpose and meaning. The result was something that no one had quite seen before, a perfect blend of old and new that would spark conversations around the world. William took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He thought about the millions of people watching from their homes, gathering in town squares, crowding around television screens in pubs and community centers. This wasn't just about him or even just about Britain. The monarchy represented something larger, a connection to history and tradition that people around the world found meaningful. A gentle knock on the door signaled that it was almost time. William opened his eyes and looked at Catherine one more time. She smiled at him, that warm, reassuring smile that had seen him through so many challenging moments. He squeezed her hand back, drawing strength from her presence. Together, they would face whatever came next. The ceremony coordinator entered the room, clipboard in hand, ready to guide them through the precise choreography that had been rehearsed dozens of times. Every step, every pause, every gesture had been planned down to the second. There could be no mistakes, no moments of uncertainty. This was theater on the grandest scale, but it was also deeply sacred and meaningful. William straightened his shoulders and prepared to walk toward his destiny. The weight of history pressed down on him, but so did the hope of millions who looked to the monarchy for stability, continuity, and inspiration. He was ready to serve, ready to lead, and ready to show the world what a modern monarch could be. As he stepped toward the door, he had no idea that his appearance would create waves of emotion that would ripple across the entire globe, touching hearts in ways no one could have predicted. The great doors of Westminster Abbey slowly swung open, and a hush fell over the congregation. William began his walk down the ancient aisle, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone floors. Every eye in the building turned toward him, and gasps rippled through the crowd. The cameras broadcasting to billions around the world zoomed in, capturing every detail of what would become one of the most discussed moments in royal history. William's coronation outfit was unlike anything anyone had expected. The designers had created something that honored every aspect of his heritage, while boldly stepping into the future. The main ceremonial robe featured intricate embroidery that told the story of the United Kingdom through symbols and patterns, each one carefully chosen to represent different regions and communities. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with thousands of hours of work visible in every inch of fabric. But it was the color palette that first caught everyone's attention. Instead of the traditional deep reds and golds that had dominated royal ceremonies for centuries, William's ensemble featured a stunning combination of royal blue and silver, with accents of white and touches of green representing hope and renewal. The blue was the exact shade of his late mother, Princess Diana's favorite color, a subtle but powerful tribute that made many in the audience catch their breath. The collar of his robe featured embroidered symbols representing all the Commonwealth. Nations, a conscious choice to show that the monarchy served not just Britain but a global family of nations. Each symbol had been designed in consultation with representatives from those countries, ensuring accuracy and respect. This attention to detail and inclusion spoke volumes about the kind of king William intended to be. As he walked, the light streaming through the abbey windows caught the silver threading in his outfit, making it shimmer and glow. It created an almost ethereal effect, as if he were walking through beams of pure light. Television commentators struggled to find words to describe what they were seeing, their voices filled with awe and emotion. Social media exploded with reactions, with people from every continent sharing screenshots and expressing their amazement. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis watched their father with wide eyes, their young faces showing a mixture of pride and wonder. Charlotte whispered something to her younger brother, pointing at the beautiful embroidery on their father's robe. Even at their ages, they could sense that this was a moment that would be remembered forever. Catherine's eyes glistened with tears as she watched her husband move toward the coronation chair. She had seen the outfit during fittings, had been part of the discussions about its design, but seeing William wear it in this sacred space, surrounded by centuries of history, overwhelmed her with emotion. She dabbed at her eyes discreetly, not wanting to disturb her makeup but unable to hold back her feelings. King Charles sat in his place of honor, watching his son approach. His own emotions were complex, a mixture of pride, nostalgia, and perhaps a touch of bittersweetness. He remembered his own coronation, the weight of the crown being placed on his head, the vows he had taken. Now he watched his son prepare to take those same vows, to accept that same weight. A single tear rolled down his cheek, quickly brushed away, but not before the cameras caught it. Queen Camilla sat beside Charles, her hand reaching for his beneath the folds of their robes. She too felt the emotional weight of the moment. She had watched William grow from a boy into a man, had seen him navigate personal tragedy and public scrutiny with grace and strength. Seeing him now stepping fully into his role as future king filled her with maternal pride. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood waiting at the altar, his ceremonial vestments matching the solemnity of the occasion. He had worked closely with William to ensure the ceremony reflected both tradition and the prince's personal values. There would be prayers, of course, and ancient rituals that dated back centuries, but there would also be moments of innovation that would surprise and move the global audience. As William reached the front of the abbey, he turned briefly to look back at the congregation. His eyes found his children first, giving them a small, reassuring smile. Then he looked at Catherine, and the love that passed between them in that moment was visible to everyone watching. Finally, his gaze swept across the assembled guests, taking in the faces of family members, friends, world leaders, and representatives from every walk of British life. Among the guests, other members of the royal family struggled with their own emotions. William's aunts and uncles, his cousins, all felt the passage of time in that moment. They remembered William as a baby, as a young boy walking behind his mother's coffin, as a teenager trying to find his way in the world. Now here he stood, about to be crowned, embodying everything the monarchy hoped to be. The music swelled, filling the abbey with glorious sound. The choir's voices rose in perfect harmony, singing hymns that had been sung at coronations for hundreds of years. But even the traditional music seemed somehow different today, infused with new energy and meaning because of the unique nature of this ceremony. William knelt before the archbishop, his magnificent robe spreading around him in a pool of blue and silver. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. He was both honoring the past and creating the future. He was showing respect for tradition while boldly declaring that the monarchy could evolve and change with the times. His outfit was not just clothing. It was a statement, a promise, and a vision all wrapped into one stunning visual message. People watching from around the world found themselves unexpectedly moved. Even those who had never paid much attention to the royal family, even those who had been critical of the monarchy, found something compelling in what they were witnessing. There was authenticity in William's bearing, sincerity in his expression, and power in his choice to honor his mother while stepping into his own identity as a future king. The coronation had become more than a ceremony. It had become a moment of collective human connection, witnessed by billions and felt deeply by millions. The archbishop began the ancient words of the coronation ceremony, his voice steady and clear, carrying through the abbey and out to the millions listening around the world. William responded to each call with confidence, his voice strong and unwavering. He had rehearsed these words many times, but now they carried real weight, real meaning. These were not just ceremonial phrases. They were promises that would shape the rest of his life. As the ceremony progressed, cameras captured reactions from around the abbey. Princess Anne sat with perfect posture, her face stoic as always, but those who knew her well could see the slight trembling of her chin, the way she pressed her lips together to maintain composure. She had served the crown with dedication for decades, and seeing her nephew take this step clearly affected her deeply. When William glanced her way during a pause in the ceremony, she gave him the smallest nod of encouragement. In the pews reserved for dignitaries, world leaders watched with fascination. The President of the United States leaned forward slightly, clearly moved by the spectacle and ceremony. The Prime Minister of Canada whispered something to her neighbor, her eyes never leaving William. Representatives from African nations, Asian countries, European states, and islands across the Pacific all bore witness to this moment, many of them streaming tears without shame or embarrassment. The regalia used in the ceremony held centuries of history. The crown, the scepter, the orb, all had been used in coronations going back generations. But William had requested one addition, something that had never been part of a royal coronation before. When the moment came, the archbishop lifted a small silver compass designed and crafted specifically for this ceremony. The compass represented guidance, direction, and the journey that lay ahead. It was a modern touch that spoke to William's understanding that being king meant navigating uncharted waters. William's voice cracked slightly with emotion as he took his vows, pledging to serve the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth with dedication and integrity. It was a rare moment of vulnerability that made him seem more human, more relatable. People watching from their homes found themselves tearing up along with him, feeling connected to this man who was accepting such an enormous responsibility. Back in his seat, Prince Harry watched his brother with complicated emotions playing across his face. Despite their differences, despite the years of tension and public disagreements, this was still his brother up there. The same person he had played with as a child, the same person who had comforted him after their mother's death, the same person he had shared countless private jokes and memories with. Harry's wife Meghan sat beside him, her hand in his, and when he wiped away a tear, she squeezed his hand gently. Whatever had passed between the brothers, this moment transcended it all. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The archbishop lifted the crown, holding it high for all to see. The crown itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, modified slightly for William with personal touches that made it unique to his reign. Instead of being heavy and austere, it had been redesigned to be lighter, more wearable, a symbol of a modern monarchy that didn't crush its wearer under the weight of tradition, but empowered them to serve effectively. As the Archbishop lowered the crown toward William's head, time seemed to slow down. Catherine held her breath, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. The children leaned forward in their seats, understanding that they were watching their father become king. Charles closed his eyes briefly, perhaps saying a silent prayer or simply absorbing the magnitude of the moment. When his eyes opened again, fresh tears streamed down his face, unashamed and unchecked. The crown touched William's head, and in that instant, everything changed. He was no longer just Prince William. He was King William, sovereign and leader. The weight of the crown was physical, yes, but also metaphorical, representing the responsibilities and duties he was now formally accepting. His expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious, more resolved. He had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. The abbey erupted in restrained applause, the sound building gradually as protocol gave way to genuine emotion. It was unprecedented for such an outburst during a coronation ceremony, but no one moved to stop it. The moment was too powerful, too meaningful. Even the Archbishop smiled, understanding that some moments were bigger than ceremony and protocol. Outside the abbey, the crowds that had been waiting patiently for hours erupted in celebration. Cheers filled the London streets, echoing off buildings and carried by the wind across the city. Flags waved with renewed vigor, strangers hugged each other, and tears of joy flowed freely. In town squares across Britain and the Commonwealth, people celebrated together, united by this shared experience of witnessing history. The global television audience reached record numbers. News organizations reported that more people were watching this coronation than any royal event in recorded history. Social media platforms temporarily slowed under the weight of millions of posts, shares, and comments. The hashtag about William's coronation look trended worldwide within minutes, with people from every culture and background sharing their reactions and emotions. Fashion experts and historians immediately began analyzing every aspect of William's outfit, writing articles and essays about its significance. The choice of colors, the symbolic embroidery, the modern styling combined with traditional elements. All of it sparked conversations about the future of the monarchy and what kind of king William would be. Fashion magazines rushed to redesign their covers, wanting to feature this historic look. But beyond the fashion and symbolism, something deeper was happening. People were connecting with William's humanity, his visible emotion, his obvious love for his family and his country. They saw in him someone who understood the weight of his position, but was willing to carry it. They saw someone who honored the past while looking toward the future. They saw someone they could believe in, someone they wanted to follow. The coronation had transformed from a ceremonial duty into a powerful moment of collective hope and renewed faith in the institution of monarchy. After the crown was placed on his head, William stood slowly, his coronation robe flowing behind him like water made of silk and precious metals. He turned to face the congregation, and for a long moment he simply stood there, allowing everyone to see him fully as their new king. The silence in the abbey was profound, almost sacred. Every person present understood they were witnessing something that would be talked about for decades, perhaps centuries to come. The next part of the ceremony called for William to be presented to the four corners of the abbey, symbolizing his sovereignty over all directions and all peoples. As he moved to each position, his bearing changed subtly. There was a grace in his movements that seemed almost choreographed yet completely natural. The way the light continued to play off his ceremonial outfit created an almost magical effect, with the silver embroidery catching and reflecting light in patterns that seemed to dance and shimmer. Catherine was called forward for her own moment in the ceremony. As she walked toward William, her elegant gown complemented his outfit perfectly. The designers had worked in secret to ensure that their looks would harmonize without matching, creating a visual representation of partnership and unity. When she reached his side, William's face softened, and he smiled at her in a way that was both public and intensely private. It was a smile that spoke of shared journeys, mutual support, and deep love. The Archbishop blessed their union as king and consort, speaking words about partnership, shared responsibility, and the importance of facing the future together. Catherine's role was being redefined in this moment, too. She was not simply a wife standing beside her husband. She was a full partner in the work of the monarchy, an equal voice in decisions that would shape the nation and the Commonwealth. This modern interpretation of royal partnership resonated deeply with younger viewers around the world. When Catherine received her own coronet, a smaller but no less beautiful crown, tears finally spilled from her eyes. She had spent years preparing for this role, balancing public duty with raising their children, supporting William through challenges and celebrations. Now officially recognized as Queen Consort in this ceremony, the reality of her position hit her fully. She looked out at the congregation, her vision blurred by tears, and saw so many faces looking back at her with love and support. Among those faces, her own family sat together, her parents and siblings watching with obvious pride. Her father had tears streaming down his face, making no attempt to hide his emotion. He had raised his daughter to be strong, capable, and kind, never imagining she would one day stand beside a king. Her mother clutched a handkerchief, dabbing at her eyes repeatedly, overwhelmed by the moment. Catherine caught their eyes and mouthed, "I love you," a small gesture that cameras captured and that would be replayed thousands of times in the coming days. The children were called forward next, a modern addition to the ceremony that William had insisted upon. George, Charlotte, and Louis approached their parents with careful steps, their young faces serious with the weight of the occasion. William knelt down to their level, speaking softly to each of them. Though the microphones didn't pick up his exact words, his gestures and expressions made it clear he was reassuring them, explaining what was happening, making sure they understood their own importance in this moment. Charlotte looked up at her mother's crown with wonder, reaching up to touch it gently with one small finger. The tenderness of the moment, the innocence of a child's curiosity combined with the weight of royal ceremony, created a powerful emotional impact. Viewers around the world found themselves crying harder at this simple interaction than at any of the formal ceremonial elements. It was a reminder that beneath all the pageantry, these were real people, a real family navigating extraordinary circumstances together. Louis, the youngest, seemed slightly overwhelmed by it all. He leaned against his father's leg, and William immediately scooped him up, holding him close for a moment before setting him back down. It was another break from strict protocol, another moment where being a father took precedence over being a king. These small acts of humanity were what made the ceremony so different, so moving, so memorable. The Archbishop led the family in a special blessing, his hands raised over them as he spoke words of protection, guidance, and grace. William bowed his head, his crown catching the light while Catherine held the hands of their children. They stood together as a unit, a family accepting their collective destiny, and the image of them standing there together would become one of the most iconic photographs of the century. As the blessing concluded, music filled the abbey once more. The choir performed a piece that had been specially commissioned for the occasion, composed by a young British musician of Caribbean heritage. The music blended traditional classical elements with contemporary rhythms and melodies, creating something that felt both timeless and completely modern. The symbolism was clear. Britain was evolving, the monarchy was evolving, and William's reign would honor tradition while embracing change. During this musical interlude, cameras panned across the congregation, capturing reactions. Sophie, Countess of Wessex, wiped tears from her cheeks with an elegant handkerchief. The Duke of Kent, elderly but still sharp, nodded along to the music with approval. Younger royals, cousins, and distant relatives watched with expressions ranging from admiration to envy, to genuine joy. Each person was processing the moment through their own lens of experience and relationship to the crown. International guests were equally moved. The Queen of Denmark dabbed at her eyes with royal composure. The King of Spain whispered something to his wife, both of them smiling through their tears. A delegation from Kenya stood and began to sway gently to the music, their cultural expression of joy and celebration adding another layer of beauty to the moment. The ceremony had become truly global, a celebration that transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. Back home in living rooms, pubs, and community centers across Britain and beyond, people watched together, sharing this experience. Elderly women who had lived through multiple monarchs wept openly. while young people who had grown up with William as a constant presence in their lives felt pride and hope for the future. The coronation was unifying people across generations, creating shared memories that would bind communities together for years to come. The ceremony moved into its final phase, where William would deliver his first address as crowned king. This was his chance to speak directly to his people, to share his vision and his heart. He approached the ornate lectern that had been positioned specifically for this moment, his coronation robes rustling softly with each step. The crown sat firmly on his head now, no longer strange or uncomfortable, but beginning to feel like a part of him. William paused before speaking, his eyes scanning the faces before him one more time. Then his gaze lifted to the cameras, knowing that his true audience extended far beyond these ancient walls. When he began to speak, his voice was clear and strong, filled with emotion but not overwhelmed by it. He spoke of duty and service, of honor and responsibility, but he also spoke of love, compassion, and the importance of unity in divided times. His speech had been written and rewritten dozens of times, but now, in the moment, William added personal touches that made it even more powerful. He spoke about his grandmother and the example she had set, about his father and the lessons learned from watching his dedication. Then, his voice breaking slightly, he spoke about his mother, Princess Diana, and how her legacy of compassion and connection would guide his reign. The mention of Diana sent a fresh wave of emotion through the abbey and around the world. William talked about the challenges facing the nation and the world, acknowledging economic difficulties, social divisions, and environmental concerns. He didn't shy away from hard truths, but he presented them wrapped in hope and determination. He spoke about the Commonwealth as a family of nations, emphasizing partnership and mutual respect rather than hierarchy. His words reflected a modern understanding of Britain's place in the world, respectful of the past but clear-eyed about the future. He made specific commitments about the kind of king he intended to be. He promised accessibility, pledging to be a monarch who listened to all voices, not just those of the privileged and powerful. He committed to environmental stewardship, declaring that his reign would prioritize sustainability and protection of the planet for future generations. He spoke about mental health, education, and support for veterans, all causes close to his heart that he had championed for years. When William spoke about family, his voice grew warmer, more personal. He thanked Catherine publicly for her strength, partnership, and love, his eyes finding hers across the space between them. She pressed her hand to her heart, tears flowing freely now, no longer trying to maintain perfect composure. He spoke about his children, about the privilege of being their father, and his determination to give them as normal a childhood as possible, despite their extraordinary circumstances. The most surprising moment came when William addressed his brother directly. Looking toward where Harry sat, William spoke about brotherhood, about shared grief and shared memories, about the importance of family even when relationships are complicated. It was a public olive branch, extended with grace and sincerity. Harry's expression showed shock, then emotion, and finally a small smile of acknowledgement. Meghan placed her hand on his shoulder, offering support as he processed this unexpected moment of reconciliation. William concluded his address with words that would be quoted and analyzed for days to come. He spoke about unity not meaning uniformity, about strength coming from diversity, about the power of compassion to heal divisions. He invoked the national motto, explaining how duty and service could be joyful rather than burdensome when approached with the right heart. His final words were a pledge to serve with his whole heart, to lead with integrity, and to honor the trust placed in him by the people. As he finished speaking, silence filled the abbey for several heartbeats. Then slowly applause began. It started with a few people, then spread like wildfire through the congregation. Within seconds, everyone was standing, clapping, many still crying, all moved by what they had just witnessed. It was unprecedented, wildly against protocol but completely unstoppable. Even the Archbishop joined in, his face beaming with approval and joy. The standing ovation continued for several minutes, waves of applause echoing off the ancient stones. William stood there, clearly moved by the response, occasionally raising his hand in acknowledgement. Catherine joined him, and together they accepted the outpouring of emotion and support. Their children, somewhat confused but excited by the energy, began clapping too, which brought smiles and laughter through the tears. Outside, the crowds had listened to every word via speakers set up throughout the city. As the speech concluded, a roar went up from millions of throats. People hugged strangers, danced in the streets, and chanted William's name. The celebration that erupted was spontaneous and genuine, a true expression of hope and joy that transcended any political divisions or doubts about the monarchy. For this moment, at least, the nation and much of the world felt united in celebration. Television commentators struggled to maintain their professional composure as they narrated the scene. Veteran journalists who had covered royal events for decades openly admitted they had never seen anything like this. The emotional response was unprecedented in its scale and intensity. Social media analytics showed engagement numbers that broke all previous records, with the speech being shared, quoted, and discussed across every platform simultaneously. Religious leaders from various faiths, who had been invited to participate in parts of the ceremony, came forward to offer blessings. The inclusion of multiple faith traditions was another modern touch that William had insisted upon, reflecting the diverse religious landscape of contemporary Britain. A rabbi, an imam, a Hindu priest, and representatives from other traditions each spoke brief words of blessing and encouragement, their presence symbolizing inclusivity and respect for all beliefs. The final blessing came from the Archbishop, who placed his hands on William's crown and spoke ancient words of consecration. This was the most sacred moment of the entire ceremony, the point where spiritual authority and temporal power intersected. William knelt once more, his head bowed, receiving this blessing with visible humility and reverence. When he stood again, he was not just crowned but blessed, not just appointed but anointed, carrying both human authority and divine mandate according to the traditions of the Church of England and the British monarchy. The ceremony concluded with a recessional that was as magnificent as the entrance had been. William and Catherine led the procession out of the abbey, their children following close behind. The family walked together down the long aisle, past faces still streaked with tears, past dignitaries still processing what they had witnessed, past cameras capturing every step for posterity. The music that accompanied them was triumphant and joyful, filling every corner of the ancient building with sound. As they emerged from the abbey into the daylight, the roar from the crowd was deafening. Thousands upon thousands of people packed every available space, craning for a glimpse of their new king and his family. The sun had broken through the clouds, bathing everything in warm golden light that seemed almost symbolic. William paused at the top of the steps, raising his hand in a wave that sent the crowd into fresh paroxysms of joy and celebration. The carriage that would carry them through the streets of London was a beautiful blend of traditional craftsmanship and modern engineering. It maintained the ornate appearance of historical royal carriages, but incorporated contemporary safety features and comfort improvements. As the family settled inside, the crowd pressed closer, phones and cameras held high, everyone wanting their own personal memory of this historic day. The procession through London took over an hour, moving slowly enough for people to see the royal family clearly. William and Catherine sat facing forward with the children between them, all four visible through the large windows. They waved constantly, smiled endlessly, and seemed to soak in the love and excitement pouring from the crowds. At several points, William pointed things out to his children, helping them understand the significance of what was happening and making sure they felt included in every moment. The streets were decorated beyond anything London had seen in decades. Union Jacks hung from every building, flowers adorned every corner, and elaborate displays created by local communities lined the route. School children held hand-painted signs and banners, their messages ranging from formal congratulations to adorable childish declarations of love for the royal family. Street performers entertained the crowds, musicians played at major intersections, and the entire city had transformed into a massive celebration. International television crews had positioned themselves at strategic points along the route, providing commentary in dozens of languages. The coronation was being watched live by an estimated 3 billion people worldwide, making it one of the most viewed events in television history. The commentary focused heavily on William's appearance, with fashion experts brought in to analyze and explain every element of his stunning coronation look. Comparisons were made to previous royal ceremonies, but everyone agreed that this was unlike anything that had come before. Back at Buckingham Palace, staff had been preparing for the return of the royal family. The balcony appearance was a crucial tradition, and preparations had been meticulous. As the carriages approached the palace, the crowd that had gathered there was even larger than the one that had lined the streets. People had camped out for days to secure spots with good views, and their patience was about to be rewarded. William and his family entered the palace briefly to prepare for the balcony appearance. This gave them a moment to catch their breath, to drink some water, and to check on the children. George had held up remarkably well, but Charlotte was showing signs of tiredness, and Louis was definitely ready for a nap. Catherine worked quickly to refresh their appearances, while William shed some of the heavier ceremonial elements of his outfit, keeping the most visually impressive pieces for the public appearance. When they stepped onto the balcony, the roar from the crowd was thunderous. William stood at the center, Catherine beside him, their children arrayed around them. Behind them, other family members took their positions, creating a living tableau of the royal family. The sight of them all together, with William in his magnificent coronation attire, created a moment of such visual and emotional power that even hardened journalists found themselves moved to tears once again. The Royal Air Force had planned a flyover to mark the occasion, and the timing was perfect. As William and his family stood on the balcony, waving to the crowds, the distinctive sound of approaching aircraft grew louder. Then, in a perfectly choreographed display, jets streamed overhead in formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke. The crowd went wild, cheering and pointing skyward as the planes passed directly over the palace. William lifted Louis in his arms so the young prince could see better, the boy's delighted face captured by dozens of cameras. But it was the final moments on the balcony that created what would become the most iconic image of the day. As the crowd continued to cheer, William turned to Catherine and pulled her close. They shared a kiss that was both appropriate for the public setting and genuinely affectionate, a real moment of connection between two people who loved each other deeply. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming, a fresh wave of cheers and applause rising up from the masses below. After the kiss, William placed his hand over his heart and then raised it toward the crowd in a gesture of gratitude and love. It was a simple movement, but it carried profound meaning. He was acknowledging the support of the people, thanking them for their presence and their faith in him. The gesture was captured in photographs that would appear on front pages around the world the next morning. Images that perfectly encapsulated the connection between monarch and people. Catherine did the same, her hand over her heart before extending it outward. The children, watching their parents, mimicked the gesture in their own adorable way. Charlotte's small hand pressed against her chest with such seriousness that it brought smiles even through the tears of onlookers. George stood tall, trying to look as regal as his father, while Louis waved enthusiastically, his young energy infectious and charming. The family remained on the balcony for nearly 20 minutes, far longer than protocol typically dictated. But William seemed reluctant to leave, wanting to savor this moment to give as many people as possible the chance to feel connected to this historic day. He moved along the balcony, bringing his children to different positions so crowds on all sides could see them clearly. He pointed out landmarks to his children, showing them the mall stretching into the distance, explaining the significance of the moment they were all sharing. Behind the main family group, other royals also waved and acknowledged the crowd. King Charles stood slightly to one side, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. Pride was evident in his face, but also something deeper, perhaps a recognition of time passing, of responsibilities shifting from one generation to the next. He caught William's eye at one point, and the two men exchanged a look of understanding that needed no words. Camilla stood beside Charles, her smile warm and genuine as she waved to the crowds below. Prince Harry and Meghan were also present on the balcony, though they stood further back. Their inclusion had been one of William's decisions, a gesture of family unity that had surprised many royal watchers. Harry seemed emotional throughout the appearance, at times looking at his brother with an expression that mixed pride, regret, and love. When William noticed him, he gestured for Harry to come forward, bringing him closer to the main group. It was another unexpected moment that would generate countless headlines and discussions about potential family reconciliation. As the balcony appearance finally drew to a close, William raised both arms in a final wave, his magnificent coronation robes catching the breeze, the crown on his head gleaming in the afternoon sun. He looked every inch the king, yet also completely human and relatable. That combination, the ability to embody both the mystique of monarchy and the warmth of genuine humanity, was what made this coronation so special and what had moved so many people to tears. The family turned and moved back into the palace, but not before William paused one final time to look out at the sea of faces, the ocean of flags, the incredible outpouring of support and celebration. He stood for a moment silhouetted against the palace doorway, creating an image that photographers scrambled to capture. Then, with Catherine's hand in his, he stepped inside, the door closing behind them as the crowd continued to celebrate in the streets below. Inside the palace, away from cameras and crowds, the family finally had a moment to themselves. William removed the crown carefully, setting it aside with reverence but also with relief. The weight of it had been considerable, both physically and symbolically. Catherine helped him out of the heaviest parts of his coronation outfit, their children watching with curious eyes. Louis asked if he could try on the crown, and William laughed, a genuine sound of joy and release after hours of formal ceremony. Staff brought refreshments and comfortable chairs. The family collapsed together, exhausted but exhilarated. They talked about the ceremony, about the crowd, about the moments that had surprised or moved them. George admitted he had been nervous. Charlotte said her favorite part was the music, and Louis declared he wanted to ride in the carriage again. William and Catherine exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their shared relief that the day had gone so well. Charles came to find them, entering the private room with Camilla. For a moment there was silence as father and... The days following the coronation brought an avalanche of global reaction that exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Newspapers around the world dedicated entire editions to the ceremony, with William's coronation look featured prominently on virtually every front page. The images were stunning, showing him in all his regal glory, the blue and silver of his outfit photographed from every angle, each shot more impressive than the last. Fashion magazines moved unprecedented numbers of copies, with special editions about the coronation selling out within hours. Designers were interviewed about the significance of William's fashion choices, with many calling it the most important royal fashion moment of the century. The decision to incorporate his mother's favorite color, the symbolic embroidery representing all the Commonwealth nations, the modern silhouette combined with traditional elements, every detail was analyzed and praised. Social media continued to buzz with activity days after the event. The hashtags related to the coronation remained trending, with new content constantly being uploaded. People shared their own photos from watching the ceremony, their emotional reactions, their thoughts about what the coronation meant for the future. Video clips of the most moving moments went viral, particularly the scenes of family members crying, William's speech, and the balcony kiss with Catherine. Fashion houses around the world immediately began working on collections inspired by William's coronation look. The color combination of royal blue and silver became instantly popular, appearing in everything from high fashion to everyday wear. Fabric stores reported surges in demand for similar materials. Costume designers for theater and film took note, recognizing that royal aesthetics were shifting in a new direction that would influence their work for years to come. The emotional impact of the coronation extended beyond fashion and spectacle. Mental health organizations reported increased calls to their hotlines in the days following the ceremony, but these were primarily positive contacts from people feeling inspired by William's openness about mental health and his obvious love for his family. Therapists noted that their clients wanted to discuss the coronation, seeing in William's visible emotion a permission to embrace their own feelings more fully. Educational institutions incorporated the coronation into their curricula, using it as a teaching moment about history, government culture, and social change. Students watched footage of the ceremony, analyzed William's speech, discussed the symbolism of his outfit, and debated what kind of monarch he might become. Teachers reported that students who normally showed little interest in royal matters were engaged and curious, asking thoughtful questions about tradition, leadership, and service. Commonwealth nations responded with particular enthusiasm to William's emphasis on partnership and mutual respect. Leaders from various countries issued statements praising his vision for the Commonwealth's future. In many Commonwealth capitals, celebrations had continued for days after the coronation. with people feeling renewed connection to the organization and hope for what it might become under William's leadership. Cultural exchanges were planned, partnerships discussed, and new initiatives proposed. The reconciliation moment between William and Harry became a major focus of media attention. Body language experts analyzed the interaction, relationship counselors discussed its significance, and royal commentators debated what it might mean for the future. While no one claimed that years of tension could be resolved in a single ceremony, there was widespread hope that this represented a turning point. Photos of the brothers together on the balcony were shared millions of times, often accompanied by nostalgic images of them as children. Religious leaders from various traditions praised the inclusivity of the ceremony and William's commitment to serving all people regardless of their faith or background. The multi-faith elements of the coronation were seen as a powerful statement about modern Britain and the monarchy's role in an increasingly diverse society. Interfaith dialogue groups reported increased interest and attendance, inspired by the example set during the coronation. The economic impact of the coronation was substantial. Tourism to Britain spiked immediately, with hotels and tour operators reporting bookings months in advance from people wanting to visit the places they had seen during the ceremony. Souvenir sales broke all previous records, with commemorative items ranging from official royal merchandise to handcrafted pieces by local artisans. Economists estimated that the coronation had generated billions in economic activity and would continue to drive tourism and commerce for years. Behind the scenes, William settled into his new role with the same dedication he had shown during the ceremony. His daily schedule filled with meetings, briefings, and events. He met with government officials, charity leaders, business executives, and ordinary citizens. Every interaction showed his commitment to the promises he had made during his coronation speech. He listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated genuine interest in the concerns and hopes of all the people he spoke with. Catherine adapted to her expanded role as well, taking on additional patronages and responsibilities. Together, she and William formed a formidable team, their partnership evident in everything they did. They made joint appearances, supported each other's initiatives, and showed the world what a modern royal couple could accomplish. Their relationship became a model that many looked to, admiring the balance they maintained between public duty and private family life. The children returned to school after a brief break, and William and Catherine worked hard to ensure that despite the enormousness of the coronation, their lives remained as normal as possible. George, Charlotte, and Louis played with friends, did their homework, and participated in regular childhood activities. But they also carried with them the memory of that extraordinary day, understanding at their own levels that they had been part of something historically significant. Months after the coronation, the impact continued to be felt. William's approval ratings soared to unprecedented levels, with polls showing support for the monarchy at its highest point in decades. But more importantly, people reported feeling more hopeful about the future. The coronation had provided a moment of unity in divided times, a reminder that beauty, tradition, and progress could coexist, that it was possible to honor the past while building something new. Art galleries began exhibiting coronation-inspired works, with painters, sculptors, and digital artists creating pieces that captured different aspects of the ceremony. Musicians composed songs and symphonies inspired by the event. Poets wrote verses about the emotion and significance of what they had witnessed. The coronation had sparked a creative renaissance, inspiring artistic expression across multiple mediums. William's coronation look entered the permanent collection of fashion history, with the original outfit destined for a museum display. Fashion students studied it as an example of how clothing could communicate complex messages about identity, values, and vision. The designers who created it found their careers transformed, suddenly in demand from clients around the world who wanted to capture some of that same magic in their own wardrobes. As the first anniversary of the coronation approached, plans were already being made to commemorate the occasion. Books were being written, documentaries produced, and exhibitions organized. But the most lasting impact was less tangible and more profound. William's coronation had reminded people of the power of ceremony, the importance of tradition, and the possibility of evolution. It had shown that a monarchy could be both ancient and modern, formal and accessible, powerful and humble. The tears that had been shed on that remarkable day by royals and commoners alike, by people of all ages and backgrounds, had been tears of joy, hope, and connection. They represented something fundamental about the human experience, our need for meaning, beauty, and shared moments of significance. William's coronation had provided all of that and more, creating memories that would last lifetimes and setting the tone for a reign that promised to be unlike any that had come before. The young man who had walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey in that stunning outfit had emerged not just as a king, but as a symbol of possibility, a bridge between past and future, and a leader ready to serve with his whole heart.